Okay, I have 10 o'clock. Hello to all of you who've joined us, and thank you so much for wanting to participate in this webinar on accessing the state's open records. I want to thank our sponsors very quickly, Members First, McKees, Wallace, and Nurek, and also Capital Blue Cross. I'm Suzanne Stoltenberg with NFIB Pennsylvania. I'd like to introduce our guest presenter today. We're very pleased that Erik Arneson decided to agree to this webinar. He is the director of the state's Office on Open Records here in Pennsylvania. Now, I'd like to say, if you have any questions at all, please do type them in and hit enter, and I will try to get to them. And if for any reason we don't, we will carry through and answer them at the end of the webinar or online or through email. Now, Erik, I want to thank you so much. I'm going to throw it to you to begin.
Good morning, Suzanne. Thank you very much for the invitation. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody taking some time out of your busy schedules. I know as small business people in Pennsylvania, you've got a lot of things competing for your time, so I appreciate you taking a few minutes to participate in this. I will go through these slides relatively quickly, just not rushing, but making sure not to waste any of your time. At the end, as Suzanne said, or as we go, if you have questions, please type them in. My contact information is listed here on this slide. I'll also have it on a slide toward the end. Feel free to reach out to me directly anytime as well. The open records law in Pennsylvania, usually called the right to know law, was completely rewritten a few years ago. All government records in the state are now presumed to be available to the public, unless they fall into one of the 30 exceptions in the right to know law itself, or if some other law, HIPAA being a classic example of that, some other law could make records non-public. If you ask a government agency for a record and they deny access to that record, they have the burden of proof to prove that the record should not be released to the public. The law also created the Office of Open Records, where I am the director, where we have a very user-friendly process for appealing decisions when an agency denies access to public records or to records. And then we determine whether or not they're public.
I would like to just quickly say, someone who asked the question about will they be able to get a copy of this presentation, the answer is yes, because we will be posting it on nfib.com/PA by tomorrow morning. Okay, Erik, I'm so sorry.
Oh, no worries. And as I do with every presentation I make, I'll also be posting it to the Open Records Office blog that I manage. But yes, you're absolutely, you can get it from the NFIB website, probably the easiest way to get this. The law created the Office of Open Records, as I said, where we hear those appeals when access to records is denied. As a result of this new right to know law, Pennsylvania is now one of the most open states in the country. And really, our goal, my goal as head of the OOR, is to make the appeals process simple for both requesters and agencies. No lawyer is necessary if you ask for a record. The agency says no. You don't need to get a lawyer involved. We have a very simple one-page appeals form. It's 15 minutes to fill that out, probably at most, and it gives you very simple directions. It should be very clear. You can always call our office if you have any questions. What happens once we get an appeal is that an attorney here, an appeals officer, is assigned to oversee the case. Both sides have an opportunity to present evidence and argument. Many times requesters who appeal decisions to this office wind up winning even without presenting any evidence or argument, because we take the evidence from the agency, which has the burden of proof, and we evaluate whether or not it meets the requirements of the law to withhold a record. Then we issue our decision, and we only have 30 days to do that. Sometimes requesters will grant us additional time. We always appreciate that, but in the statute, we only have 30 days to make a final determination, so it is a very quick process. Last year, we had our heaviest caseload to date. Nearly 3,000 appeals were filed. You can see there what the trend line has been. The office opened on January 1st of 2009. We had about 1,150 appeals that year, up to nearly 3,000 last year. Appeals last year were filed For the first time ever, inmates made the biggest single category of appellants. 48% of our appeals were filed by inmates last year. There's some legislation pending that might change that, Senate Bill 411, which I'll mention in a little while in another context. 8% of appeals to the Office of Open Records were filed by companies. Now, of course, sometimes if somebody just says, my name is Erik Arneson, and doesn't say that I'm representing Arneson Enterprises, we wouldn't necessarily know that they were representing a company, so that might be a little bit higher. But we do know that at least 8% of the appeals were filed by companies last year. This chart just shows you the resolution of appeals before our office. Taking out the inmate appeals, this chart only shows the results of non-inmate appeals. And basically what you can see there is that 30% were granted or partially granted, 18% were withdrawn, and the requester is the only person that can withdraw them, and that usually only happens when records have been provided. And in 2% of the cases, the appeal was found to be moot or partially moot. Again, that happens only when the requester has received records from the agency as part of the appeal. So basically, in half of the cases that we decide, the requester winds up at least getting some of the records that they had originally been denied access to. Again, this only looks at non-inmate appeals. The results for inmate appeals are quite different. About 40% of the appeals we heard last year involved state agencies. You can see the breakdown there. About 60% of our appeals involved local agencies. And here the biggest section, if you combine cities, boroughs, and townships, local government units, they were really the biggest source of appeals to the Office of Open Records. Decisions they made to deny records appealed to us. Counties, also a large chunk. School districts and charter schools, perhaps a little surprising, not quite as big as you might think. We offer mediation here at the Office of Open Records. If you do make a request and it's denied, one of the questions on that appeal form I talked about is, do you want to have mediation? This is a way to informally resolve cases. It's a much more relaxed sort of process in many ways. At the end of it, if mediation doesn't work out, it goes right back into our standard appeal process, so you really haven't lost out on anything. The benefit is that at the end of a mediated process, the appeal winds up getting withdrawn. Both sides are satisfied, if not happy, and there's no chance of further court action. Whereas if the Office of Open Records issues a final determination that grants access to a record, for example, the agency could appeal that to the county court if it's a local agency, or to Commonwealth Court if it's a state agency. So the mediation process really ensures, when it's successful, it ensures that that's the end of the process and there's no court action necessary, which of course, as you all know, can be very expensive. Some provisions in the right to know law that I think are potentially of direct interest to businesses. There's an online state contract database. Every state agency contract valued at $5,000 or more is available through that database. And now there are years and years of contracts available there, dating back to January 1st of 2009. In the early years, there were some growing pains, but now it's working very smoothly every time I've tried to use it, and anecdotally what I've heard as well. So if you're a company interested in doing business with the state, one great resource is the contract database at the Pennsylvania Treasury website, where you can go and review contracts entered into with companies which provide services or goods similar to what you could provide. Local contracts are also available under the right to know law, whether it be with a city, a borough, a school district, a county, what have you. There's no centralized database for those at this point, but what you can do is make a request under the right to know law to the government agency you're interested in potentially doing business with. They might be able to make some redactions on the contract depending on the exact nature of it. And if you're denied access to a contract, or you think that the redactions were overly broad, you can appeal all of those things here to the Office of Open Records.
May I ask a quick question, Eric?
Of course.
What might be redacted? Personal financial information of other companies, or just give us a general idea?
Sure, two things, and I'll get into this a little bit more going forward, but you're right. Personal financial information could be redacted, account numbers, routing numbers, things like that. And there's also a provision in the Right to Know law designed to protect trade secrets, so that if you're a company that has a contract with an agency and there's something in that contract that you think is a trade secret, the agency needs to notify you before they release it, and you have an opportunity to weigh in and say, look, pages 4 through 6 of this contract are really trade secrets. I think you need to redact those. The agency then makes that decision. I've never seen a case where the agency didn't redact what the company said was a trade secret. So those are the two main categories, personal financial information and trade secrets. This is a screenshot of the state contract database. As you can see, there are a number of fields that you can use to search. You can do a simple keyword search. You can search for specific companies under the contracting parties. On the right-hand side, you can select the agency that you're interested in, date ranges, the amount of the contract. So there's a wide variety of ways to narrow down your search for state contracts that you might be interested in reviewing. There are also, under the Right to Know law, some procurement records are available for public inspection, specifically records related to agency procurement or disposal of supplies, services, or construction. They are available either after a contract is awarded or all bids are rejected. So if a contract has recently been awarded by a particular agency, or all bids have been rejected by a particular agency, you might be able to get some more information under this provision to help you perhaps improve a future bid of your own for a contract from that agency or from another agency. Providing access to these kinds of records, from my point of view, it not only helps businesses compete for government contracts, but what that increased competition does in the end is reduce taxpayer costs. So, you know, the Right to Know law at its core is really designed to allow citizens to hold their government accountable. This is what I see as a very positive side effect of the law, whereby taxpayers will benefit when better contracts come into agencies, better proposals come into to agencies for procurement. Depending what business you're in, you might also be interested in some of the open data portals around the state. There are two main ones right now, Philadelphia and the Western Pennsylvania Regional Data Center. And what these have are very large data sets of everything from the location of parks in a city to the rates of crime in different neighborhoods to certain economic development data, certain demographic data, all sorts of very large data sets. So if you've got some ability to manipulate data, or you know somebody who can do that sort of thing, and you're interested in doing business in Philadelphia or Allegheny County, basically, with the Western PA Regional Data Center, definitely check out those two websites and see what's available. At this point, Pennsylvania does not have a statewide comparable open data portal, but New York does. That's a very good example of what it could look like here in Pennsylvania, and I know that some thought is being given to developing something like that for the Commonwealth.
So, quick question, if you were to go into, let's say you wanted to expand your business to Philly and you want to know what would the customer base be, what is that, census information they include?
Some of it is census information, some of it is locally generated, It's all very neatly packaged and easy to sort through. As I said, they have some economic development sorts of things there. They might have, for example, an available property data set of industrial properties or retail properties that currently have vacancies. I'm not 100% certain that those specific examples exist on either of these two, but I've seen them on other data sets. So that's the kind of thing that's available.
And that's helpful. Okay.
Very good. Some other provisions of the Right to Know law to be aware of. If you are involved in a contractual relationship with an agency, some third-party contractor records are public. Just because a particular public record happens to be in possession of the contractor rather than the agency doesn't mean that it's not public. It doesn't mean that your records are public. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying anything of the sort. But if, as a very simple example, the only copy of the contract exists at the company for some reason, that contract is still a public record. Financial documents that directly relate to that contract are going to probably be public records as well. So in some instances, my point is this, you might get a request from the agency that you've contracted with that says, here's the open records request we've received. Do you have any records that fall into these categories? And then you'll work with the agency to determine whether or not you have those records, and if so, are they public? Do they need to be redacted? Do they include trade secrets, for example, that sort of thing. So the point here is simply this. Be aware of the fact that a subset of records that involve your company may be public if you're doing business with a government agency. And on trade secrets, if you believe that you have a trade secret that's included in any documents that you're sharing with a government agency, it's very important to notify that agency, hopefully before a right to know request comes in, because the agency is required to provide notification to companies before releasing that information if they are aware of it. If an agency has a contract, for example, and it includes trade secret type information, but nobody has ever told the agency that, it might be unreasonable to expect the agency to know that on its own. So be aware of that as well, that you have some responsibility to make sure that trade secrets, that agencies are notified of the fact that trade secrets might be included in documentation you've provided. The Right to Know law also gives the Office of Open Records responsibility for providing training on the Right to Know law, also the Sunshine Act. Last year we provided 54 sessions across the state. I'm hoping to increase that this year. I'm also looking to have online training resources available both for agencies and also requesters to walk people through the process. If you have an idea or you're interested in brainstorming some kind of training idea that might be helpful to a group you're involved in, call us, check out our website. There are some basics about what makes a good training session up on our website. George Speece is our Chief of Training and Outreach. He does an excellent job. So we'd love to hear from you if you have any ideas in that area that you think could be useful. And that is the total of my presentation. I'm happy to answer more questions, of course, Suzanne. And as I said to anybody listening to this, feel free to reach out to me directly. All of my contact information is there on the screen.
I would like to ask a few questions, if you don't mind. First of all, from a business perspective, people may want to know what kinds of records are available so that they can say, hey, that could really help me in my business. And I wondered if, and I don't know if you do, but do you have any feel for what kind of inquiries you do get from business groups and or in companies?
It tends to be related to contracts. It tends to be related to property records, tax records, things along those lines tend to be involved when companies are appealing decisions to the Office of Open Records. Now, remember that I'm only seeing appeals. I'm not seeing requests. So if somebody makes a request to an agency and that request is granted and the requester goes away happy, it never gets to me. So I don't have a full sense of what companies are requesting, but in terms of appeals, that's what tends to get appealed to us the most.
Now, in the municipal area, what kinds of records might a small business in its township or in its county be able to find and look at? Would it be data, for example, okay, like what kind of tax data are you talking about? Are we talking about property tax or more than that?
You're talking about property taxes, you're talking about delinquent taxes, you're talking moving out of taxes, things like, as simple as the county treasurer in every county maintains a list of people who have purchased dog licenses. And most municipalities have a record of people who have applied for building permits or building expansion permits to add a deck or to build an addition to their house or a new structure on their property. Or to install a swimming pool, things like that.
It seems to me, because I was a reporter for many years in a prior life, that we used open records quite frequently, and I believe a lot of our callers may not be aware of all of the amount of records that do exist and how much material is there. And I'm thinking if I were in a particular type of business, for example, you just mentioned the dog licenses, if I wanted to say, hey, is this viable to expand to this area, and I have a business related to kennels or dog washing, whatever it may be, you may not even know that you can get a lot of data about what you do. Am I right about that?
No, you're absolutely right. Going back to the very beginning of the presentation, if it is a record that is maintained, created, maintained, stored, whatever, any of those things by a government agency, it is presumed to be available to the public. There are exceptions, of course, but it's presumed to be available to the public. So if you think of something that the government has, that in this case, under this law, state government has or local government in Pennsylvania has, that might be of interest to you, it is presumed to be public unless it meets one of the 30 exceptions in the law or some other law makes it non-public.
Okay, first, someone has asked what is at Erik Open Records, and let me just explain that that is what's called a Twitter handle, I'm assuming. Am I right about that? And also at
yes.
Open Records PA. So if you're on Twitter, that's how you can find Erik. But what you really want, if you want email, is the bottom one here,
right.
earneson@pa.gov. Now, I did want to ask you one more question, which I feel people may not know, if you don't mind. It seems to me when I was asking for public records as a reporter, there was a sample request. How do you even find out what's there and whether it exists, and what is the proper legal way to request it?
And I apologize. You broke up there on my end just a little bit. Can you repeat that?
Sure. Let's say that I have a business, but I'm not aware of what's in the databases that the counties and the townships and the state hold. How do I find that out, and then how do I make the actual request, or to make a request and not knowing exactly what's there, and what's the formal process? Is there a sample letter that you can use or an email, a sample?
Sure, thank you. In my experience, the best way to find what's available is simply to search county websites and municipal websites. And even if the municipality you're particularly interested in doesn't have a website, or the county you're interested in doesn't have a fully developed website, you can look at other counties. Not every county in Pennsylvania has the same exact set of records as another county, but it's not generally too far off. And in terms of making that initial request, again, it's a very simple one-page form. It's available on our website. Most county and municipal websites also have a link to that form. Some of them have taken our form and created a customized version of it. In those cases, you're free to use either one. Every agency in Pennsylvania has to accept the Office of Open Records standard request form. They might also have different versions of that on their own website, which you can use if you choose to.
Okay, I have another. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say very quickly, what happens when you submit that request is that the agency has 5 business days, 5 agency business days to get back to you, and they will either say your appeal has been granted, your appeal has been denied, or some combination of the both. Or what happens pretty regularly is that they might take a 30-day extension, and that'd be a calendar day, 30 calendar day extension, because there's something about the request that they couldn't complete in that initial 5 business day period.
Like, for example, if some of the material is archived. Now, I do have another question I'm going to ask you, but before I do, just to finish that thought, I'm curious if there's ever a fee for this, because, of course, you know, that might make it harder and make you less likely to seek it out if you got to pay a lot of money for copies and things.
Sure, I'm very glad you raised that. The most that can be charged at this point under the right to know law is a 25-cent per page copying fee. That is only if the records need to be produced for some reason on paper, or if redactions are necessary, because even though we have a lot of fancy electronic tools, the only true way to make sure that a redaction is secure is to print the record out, mark it out with black marker, and then scan it back in. Excuse me for 1 sec. Thank you. So the right to know law has some pending amendments in the General Assembly. One of the concerns that has been raised by agencies through the time period that this law has existed since January of 2009 is that the number of commercial requests has been much higher than anticipated. Senate Bill 411 would allow agencies to charge a somewhat higher scale for certain commercial requests when they get into more complicated and voluminous types of records. It would still be relatively inexpensive. It would be the hourly wage of the lowest paid person at the agency who's qualified to retrieve the records. And there's some initial time up front that they can't charge that for. So a very simple request, there wouldn't be that kind of additional charge for. But that's in a bill, not a law. So that's just pending at this point.
We do have a question, and I'm thinking, first let me just ask it and then flesh out the question for this gentleman. Paul wonders, are real estate transactions in the database? And let's just say that you are in the real estate business, or for some reason you're in some business that you need to know that kind of thing. Where would you go as well to get those records, which he's asking, are they public and in the database?
That's a great question. Because he's asking about the database, I'm assuming he's asking about real estate transactions which involve a state agency of some type, which would include, for example, schools in the state system of higher education and a lot of the more typical state agencies as well. I don't know.
But let's talk about just regular, I know, for example, in my local paper they'll have real estate transactions printed in York County where I live. How does he access those, for example?
Sure. Those are really handled through the Recorder of Deeds office. Because they are a judicial agency, the way Pennsylvania is set up, they don't fall under the right to know law. Access to those is provided by some counties online, not all counties. It's a county by county decision. So it really depends on what county you're interested in, and the best contact is the Recorder of Deeds office in that county.
And even if it's not online, you might be able to walk in and look through them in an office. Is that correct?
Absolutely, potentially that's possible. When I was a reporter at the Lebanon Daily News, one of my weekly trips was to the Lebanon County Recorder of Deeds office, and you could go in, search and sort by date of transaction, so we would be able to very easily find the transactions that had been logged in the past week or the past month.
Okay, well, folks, I see that you don't have any more questions up, but feel free, if they come to your mind about your particular business or how this law might help or hurt you, to send them forth to me. Here's my contact information. It's suzanne.stewart, stoltenberg@nfib.org, and I've also been sending you emails, so you probably have me if you just put Suzanne as a find in your inbox. Anyway, Erik, I want to thank you so very much. I really appreciate your time, and perhaps as people find out more about this, I'll be forwarding you some questions from them. Thank you all for joining us today, and have a lovely week.